Hello, everybody. This is Carol Maletta. Welcome to the Parenting 411 podcast, where we share information parents need from sources they can trust. Hello, listeners. Today, I am so thrilled to have with us an individual who has dedicated his life to understanding the intricate web of trust. A father, author, and a renowned trust-building expert, Darryl Stickel's unique blend of personal and professional experiences offers a profound understanding of the role trust plays in our lives. Whether it's navigating the intricate journey of parenting, or shedding light on the profound impact of trust on our mental well-being. Darryl's insights are both enlightening and invaluable. He's the author of the acclaimed book, Building Trust, Exceptional Leadership in an Uncertain World, and has left an indelible mark on countless conferences and events with his engaging storytelling and practical guidance. So please join me in welcoming Darryl Stickel to our show. Hello, Darryl.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. This topic is so important. I am honored to have you here with me. Why are you so passionate about this topic?
Well, for me, it's a part of how I grew up. I grew up in a small town in northern Canada, fairly isolated. It was this feeling like it was a sense of community, like we should help each other. The strong should protect the weak, and I always believe that if I could help people, I should. And when it comes to the topic of trust, it's so central and essential to us thriving, both as individuals and as a society. And I'm so delighted to be here on your podcast because the overlap of the two things I care most about, trust and parenting. So for me, trust is so essential to us being successful, whether it be as a leader at a senior level in an organization, as a partner in a caring relationship, or more specifically for our purposes as a parent.
I like it. It's so important, as you said, to all relationships, because it really helps everyone involved know what they can expect from the other person, what's acceptable, and clarity on what's not acceptable. And it just provides a certain comfort level, doesn't it?
It does. And it also gives us the opportunity to have the best possible story of each other so that we interpret things through a positive lens, so that there's an opportunity to clear up misunderstandings, for us to ask questions and figure out how to get along better. It provides us with grace.
Right. I really like that idea. Yes, grace is also very important. Now, how is trust the root of so many world problems? I know that you feel that way. Talk about that.
Yeah, so we're facing a bunch of what I call big, hairy problems. Some people call them wicked problems. Things like climate change, things like race relations, things like global pandemics, changing norms and values. There's all of these sort of big challenges that we're facing, and it requires us to pull together to resolve them. And so I believe that we have to have collective collaborative action to solve underlying trust problems, the big thorny ones. And trust levels are at the lowest we've ever seen.
Right. And you talked earlier about how you grew up in your town and how you felt there was a sense of trust there. There was a sense of community. And so I'm wondering, why don't we have more trust in the world now?
Yeah, so it may be harder than it's ever been. Research and studies continuously show us that trust levels are among the lowest we've ever seen. To really understand that, we would have to think about, how does trust work? And for me, trust is the willingness to be vulnerable when you can't completely predict how someone else is going to behave. And so there's an element of uncertainty and vulnerability in that definition. And when we're deciding whether to trust someone, we ask ourselves two fundamental questions. The first question is, how likely am I to be harmed? Which is perceived uncertainty. And the second question is, if I'm harmed, how bad is it going to hurt? Which is perceived vulnerability. Those two things multiply together. So it's uncertainty times vulnerability gives us a level of perceived risk. And we each have a threshold of risk that we're comfortable with. If we go beyond that threshold, we don't trust. If we're beneath it, then we do. And so let's think about early in relationships. Uncertainty is fairly high. That means that the range of vulnerability we're willing to expose ourselves is pretty low. As that relationship deepens, our uncertainty starts to decline. The range of vulnerability we're able to tolerate starts to grow. And our really deep, tight, close relationships with those we care most about, we've just got a sliver of uncertainty, which means that there's a huge range of vulnerability we can tolerate from that other person. We can share our most intimate details. We can share the things we care about most with them. If I was to ask you, has vulnerability gone down over the last decade? Our perceptions of vulnerability? I would suspect that the answer would be no.
No?
But boy, has our uncertainty really bounced.
Oh, yes. I see what you're saying. Yes, definitely. And so uncertainty for sure.
Yeah. So our vulnerability is sort of where it is, and it might have even increased a little bit, as we become more globally connected.
Right.
But our uncertainty is off the charts. That makes people incredibly uncomfortable. And it makes that ask of being just a little bit more vulnerable, of me trusting you by being a little more vulnerable to you, a harder and harder ask to make. And let's think about any parents that are listening. I don't know about you, but for me, I'm never more vulnerable than when it comes to my kids.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So I can't tolerate a lot of uncertainty. And so how do I manage that? Do I become overwhelmingly paranoid? Do I micromanage them? Do I suppress them? Do I control them? Well, our kids need to separate from us. They need to become themselves. They need to create their own identity. And the harder we hold on, the harder they have to fight to get free, to live their own lives, to be able to stand on their own feet. And the harder they have to fight, the more damage they do to that relationship. The harder it is for us to recover.
Right.
So what's another way for us to actually reduce that uncertainty, to feel more comfortable? Well, for me, I say to my sons, I'm never more vulnerable than when it comes to you. I can't tolerate a lot of uncertainty. And if I'm left in the dark, then I start creating the worst possible stories. I need you to help me by letting me know what's going on. And so they tell me things that I never would have told my parents to help me feel more comfortable so that I understand what's going on for them. And I got to tell you, Gloria, no one cares more about them than I do. I would rather they come to me when they're struggling with challenges than to some total stranger or to one of their buddies who maybe doesn't know even as much as they do about what's going on. And so for me, it's all about, things have gotten bad because uncertainty's gotten so high. And part of our challenge here is to be more intentional. The old ways we used to build trust aren't as effective as they used to be, because we used to just sort of go by instinct, and there were all kinds of factors in the environment that created stability. We were part of societies or communities that were relatively stable. Those things are all sort of dissipating. And we need to be more intentional than we've ever been. That's how we build trust in these sort of challenging times. And so I have conversations often with my sons about the model that I use, about how they can help me feel more comfortable, about my narrative when things are going awry.
Yeah. How old are your sons now?
They are 22 and 19.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I started this when they were very young, though.
Right. Well, right. And I'd like to start talking about that. How can parents begin to build trust starting when their children are really young?
We'll be right back after this.
If you're looking to reach a massive audience of parents and caregivers, then look no further than ProPix by the Parenting 411, the ultimate marketing program designed to skyrocket your brand to new heights. With ProPix, we've created 3 incredible packages to suit your marketing needs and budget. So let's take a look. First up is our social starter package. You'll receive a stunning graphic promo piece, plus we'll also feature your brand on the Parenting 411 Instagram page. It's the perfect way to make a memorable first impression and get parents buzzing about your business. Now, if you're ready to level up, our Parenting Pro package is where it's at. You'll enjoy all the benefits of the social starter package, plus more awesome benefits, including exposure on the Parenting 411 podcast, which reaches parents in more than 22 countries each week. But wait, there's more. For those seeking the pinnacle of marketing power, our Elite Exposure package is the way to go. You'll get even more exposure across our platform, including thousands of followers and connections on LinkedIn. Get ready to dominate the airwaves and establish yourself as the go-to resource for families everywhere. Take advantage of ProPix by the Parenting 411 today and unlock unparalleled marketing opportunities for your business. But I should tell you that prices are set to increase on November 1st, so act now. ProPix by the Parenting 411 is your passport to the hearts and minds of parents. Visit ProPixbyP411.com. Join us today and watch the magic happen. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
I used to work with families in crisis and troubled teens, and working in group homes and receiving homes and those kinds of things. And when our kids are young, they're kind of like the night watchman. You know, I borrow this phrase from a friend of mine. They test every door, praying to God that it's closed and locked. And what they need is consistency and certainty.
Yes.
And so when my kids were young, I took great care about never making promises that were for things outside my control. Instead, I would make promises about the effort that I would make. That's integrity, right? It's the integrity lever. And I was overwhelmingly consistent so that they could predict my behavior very easily. And they came to understand that if I said something, I meant it. So, an example, my oldest was 3 years old, and we're at the McDonald's, and there's this play area, and it's got this constructed area that you can climb up in and all these kinds of things. And he gets up there, and it's time for us to go. So I start calling him, and he won't come down. And I have to climb up into this structure to get him. Now, those structures aren't really built for I'm 6'3", and I'm 220 pounds at the time. It's not really built for me, right? And so I'm corkscrewing my way into this thing, and I finally get to him. And he's got this terrified look on his face, right? Like, oh, Dad's going to be mad. And I said to him, I need you to remember this moment, because we're not coming back here for a really long time. And so we go down the slide. Fast forward 3 months later, we're driving past that same McDonald's, and he goes, hey, there's that McDonald's. And I said, yeah. And he goes, we haven't been there for a really long time.
And that's what you said.
That's right. And I said, yeah, that's right. We haven't. Do you remember why? And he said, yeah, I wouldn't come down out of the slide. And so experiences like that taught him that, Dad isn't going to lose it. He's not going to freak out. But when he says something, he means it.
Yes, that was so important to me for my children when they were younger too. And I said in business, cash is king. With parenting, consistency is king and queen for mom too. And I'll never forget one Halloween. We were getting ready to go out with our children, and there was one cul-de-sac where they had a Halloween, it would be a Halloween party, a little gathering before everyone went out into the neighborhood for trick-or-treating. And so, we had gotten home from school. There were a few things I wanted to make sure we got done before we headed out. And one son was just in this hurry, not listening, and ran on, it wasn't far, but rushed on out to the party.
Right.
And then the other one stayed, and he came back home, and he was expecting to go trick-or-treating. I said, no, you're going to stay here, because I talked about the order, when we were going to do things that day, and when they came home from school, and he didn't follow my instructions, and so he didn't get to go. And so he stayed home with his dad and helped hand out candy. And so I became the mom. I mean, people couldn't believe that I did not let him go trick-or-treating. And but a lot of the moms were like, I couldn't have done that. I mean, I really admire that you stood by what you said. But yeah, that's what I really wanted them to understand, that if I said it, whether it was a pleasant consequence or not so pleasant in this case, then that's the way it was going to be. They really need that security, as you said, and like testing all the doors and making sure they lock. I also liken it to being in a pinball machine. Of course, children today might not understand that, but I mean, basically, when they come out into this world and they're trying to figure out limits, they're bumping up against things, just like the ball and the pinball, because they're trying to figure out, can I go out here? Can I go out there? When really conversation and communication will really give them a sense of the boundaries that they have. And that's trust, because that builds trust, rather, because they know that you are, you're looking out for them.
So many times I would be parachuted into families by social services because there was a crisis going on. And I would find that basically the child was running the house, that there were no boundaries, no structure. The parents had just basically abdicated all of that. And I'd say to them every time, your kid's going to hate me for the first 2 weeks. Then they're going to love me. And it happened that way every time, because I would say, these are the boundaries, these are the rules. And they would test them, they'd break the boundaries, and then there would be a consequence. And I would tell them, you're going to break the rules, and this is what the consequence is going to be. And it happened every time. And for the first 2 weeks, they'd be like, I hate that guy. I wish he would never come back. And then after 2 weeks, they're like, when's Darryl coming back? Because it gave them that feeling of structure and security and safety. And they need that when they're young. And so, I believe we all have the capacity to build trust. Some are just better than others.
You're right.
Those who aren't very good have a lever that they pull, and they pull it over and over again. And often it's the ability lever. Do it because I'm the dad. I know better than you. I have X amount of experience.
I'm bigger than you.
All of those things, right? Those who are better at building trust have multiple levers that they pull. Those who are really good have multiple levers, and they know when to pull which one. And, my kids both went through a phase where they would engage in tantruming, or, they'd have a full-on wobbly over something. And I would just sit down with them, even when they weren't old enough to really understand. I wanted them to hear this story from me. And I'd say to them, I want you to be successful. What you're doing right now, not going to get you there. You need to find a different way. And the more upset you become, the more you tantrum, the more determined I become to make sure you don't get what it is you're after. Because I don't want you to learn the lesson that having a tantrum is the way to get what you want. And I knew I was doing all right when my oldest was 6 or 7. The youngest was 3 or 4. They're sitting in the back seat of the car. The youngest starts to have a tantrum, starts to lose it. And the oldest just looks over at him and says, "You're wasting your time with Dad. That never works." And I was like, "Yeah, we're doing all right."
That's
And
right.
so they started to learn that there had to be other ways for them to get what it was that they wanted in life. And so they started
Right.
to learn to ask questions and to negotiate and to problem solve, because then as they became older and were able to articulate their needs more clearly, I was able to say, well, here's what my concerns are. Help me
Mhm.
address these. This is
Right.
what I'm worried about.
Yep.
And so it became a conversation that we had rather than me being the arbitrator of all good and evil.
Hmm. Hmm.
It became, you need to help me deal with the challenges that I'm facing with that ask.
Hmm. Hmm. I like that. Now, I wonder what kind of strategy would you recommend for parents who need to build trust or rebuild trust because they didn't really do those things in the early years, but now they're in the midst of the teen years
Mm,
when they're older, they're spending more and more time away, they are being influenced more by their peers.
right.
uh, what can parents do then?
So I think for me, I told you that trust is a combination of uncertainty and vulnerability. My kids have a deep rooted belief that I have their best interest at heart.
Mhm.
And four of the levers that I talk about 10 levers we can use to build trust. Four of them reside within uncertainty, because uncertainty comes from two places. It comes from us as individuals, and it comes from the context that we're embedded in. And for us as individuals, our ability to build trust, or our perceptions of trustworthiness, stem from three levers. They are benevolence, integrity, and ability. Benevolence is the belief you've got my best interest at heart.
Mhm.
Integrity is doing
Hmm. Just a moment. I think you froze there for a second. Let me see here.
what's best for me.
Darryl, can you start again with those three levers because you
Sure.
froze?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Uh, let's see. You were talking, you were beginning to speak. Well, actually start at the beginning with the three.
Sure.
And yeah.
So, as an individual, there are three levers I can pull to build trust with someone. It's the trustworthiness levers. And most of the research talks about these specific types of levers, but they don't talk about how to pull them.
Mhm.
And those three levers are benevolence, the belief that you've got my best interest at heart; integrity, do I follow through on my commitments and do my actions align with the values that I express? And ability, do I have the competence to do what I say I'm going to do? Now, my favorite lever is benevolence. When my oldest Thomas was 12, he looked at me one day and he said, "Dad, I always believe that you have my best interest at heart. Even when you're upset with me, I know it's about what's best for me." And when I work with parents, I'll ask them, who here has their kid's best interest at heart? Every hand in the room goes up, right? Because of course it does.
Mhm.
When I flip that question and say, how many of your kids would say that? It's about a third, and it's somewhat hesitant.
Mhm.
And it's because we haven't actually included them in the conversation,
Mhm.
right? And we've made assumptions about what their best interests are. And when you and I are thinking about our kids, we're thinking about today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year, 10 years from now. We want them to engage in behaviors now that are going to help them 10 years from now. I don't hold myself to that standard, right? And they're thinking about right now. And so if there was one lever I was going to pull, it would be benevolence. And it would look something like, how do I help you be successful in the moment? Because helping you be successful now earns me the right to talk about the future.
Mhm.
Once you start to interpret my actions through that lens, that I care about you, I love you, and I'm all about what success looks like for you, then you give me incredible latitude
Mhm.
and you interpret my actions in the best possible way. And one of the things that I do for a lot of so all of my training and development stuff, all of my workshops, my coaching, I get people to practice and apply the levers. I get them to go out and actually try this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so your listeners could try the following conversation. I heard this guy, Darryl, he was talking about trust. And he said that one of the levers, one of the things that's really important is benevolence. And that means having someone's best interest at heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I do that, but it doesn't always seem to land that way. Have you ever experienced that where you thought you were doing something good for one of your friends or someone in your class and it just landed with a thud? And then we start to narrow the funnel.
Mm-hmm.
And we say, when was the time you felt like somebody really had your back, really had your best interest at heart? What did that look like? What did they do? How did it feel? Get curious about that. And as they're starting to explain it, we're priming them to think about what their best interests are. And we're also getting hints.
Mm-hmm.
And then we narrow the funnel a little further. And we say, what does success look like for you? How do I help you get there? What would it look like if I was benevolent? And now we've created a moment for transparency where we're able to actually refer back and say, you remember when you told me this is what mattered to you? This is me trying to help you get there.
Mm-hmm.
So my oldest son, Thomas, wanted to get a baseball scholarship. And I said to him, well, that means you have to work really hard. You're going to have to do well in school. You're going to have to eat well. You're going to have to exercise. You're going to have to be a good teammate. You're going to have good relationships with your coaches. Do any of these desires and demands sound familiar to any of the other parents out there, do you think? I think those are things we all sort of want for our children to engage in.
Mm-hmm.
Except that now all of a sudden he interprets it not as me getting on him, but as me having his back.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I ask questions about that, and when I'm thinking about those things and problem solving with him around how to be the best teammate he can be, how to improve his relationship with his coaches, he's hearing it from the perspective of, wow, dad's really trying to help me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think if we're struggling, and I had the joy and benefit of having built a really strong relationship with my sons. They never felt like they needed to fight to separate. And when Thomas was 16, we walked to his baseball practice. All his buddies are standing there. And he turns to me, gives me a huge hug, says, Dad, I love you, in front of all of his buddies.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is pure gold.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had other parents say to me, your kids run to you. They are so overjoyed to see you. And it's about building those strong relationships so that you can still ask them hard questions. You can still hold them accountable. But there's not this feeling like you're punishing them. It's this feeling like you're on their side and you're trying to help them grow and become who they could possibly be.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so as our kids get older, we need to start shifting more and more focus towards that benevolence piece. And I talk about having a relentlessly positive story about my kids. It means that I interpret the world through a positive lens. And it doesn't mean that I'm blind, but I start with that positive narrative.
Mm-hmm.
And I get curious and I'm on their side. And, that allows me to have sometimes really hard conversations with them.
Well, what would you say to parents who don't have quite that relationship with their children? How can they work their way back to a more positive relationship with their children?
So I can say this with some authority because I've had clients who've had those struggles.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be working with senior executive teams or with MBA students or in a variety of situations where they've come to me and said, look, this stuff is great, but the relationship I want to focus on is my kids because it's broken and I'm struggling. And I've seen incredible results within a few months. And a lot of it revolves around actually being intentional, articulating, using the model, right? So talking about I want to have a stronger relationship. Being able to say to them, hey, you matter to me. Part of it is that being willing to be vulnerable first,
Mm-hmm.
And I would get into disagreements with my sons at any age.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be a moment where I'd think, oh my God, we're really stuck here. Somebody's going to have to be the adult. Oh, crap. It's probably going to have to be me.
Mm-hmm.
And so once we drop the facade of perfection, and this is a challenge for all of us, once we start to acknowledge that we're flawed human beings, that we make mistakes, it allows room for them to be imperfect as well.
Mm-hmm.
And actually having some of the conversations. And I'm not trying to flog the book, but in the book, I talk about levers that we can pull and how we can pull them. And a lot of it involves perspective taking, understanding the other person's narrative, a Socratic approach, like a coach approach, asking questions, trying to come alongside. And, some of your parents are out there listening right now going, I try to ask questions and I get these monosyllables.
Mm-hmm.
And if we frame the questions from a perspective of, this is really important to me, my relationship with you matters more to me than anything else, and I feel like I'm screwing it up, that acknowledgement that I'm not perfect opens a crack. And that ability to say, hey, I didn't handle that the way I should have,
Mm-hmm.
our ability to monitor being a human being rather than being a paragon of perfection,
Mm-hmm.
starts a norm of reciprocity.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of my kids searching for the cracks and finding the hypocrisy of me thinking I'm perfect and being not perfect,
Right.
being able to show them I'm not perfect and it's okay. And I don't expect you to be perfect, but I really want to help you thrive in the world. I want to help you develop the skills to be successful in life. Coming from that place, developing that story, that co-created narrative, so that they start interpreting the world not through a lens of, you're trying to control me, you want to own me, to a lens of, you're trying to help me thrive and flourish,
Mm-hmm.
starts to get them to give us more benefit of the doubt.
Yes, and I like that co-created narrative. I like that because we really do we need information from them. Because sometimes as parents, we assume we know what they need, we know what they want. I mean, we were that age once. Uh, we we know what we're trying to do, what we're trying to provide for them. They need to be appreciative. So we just don't always want to listen to them and hear what they have to say. We just assume we've got them all figured out, and if they would just
Right.
listen, they would just listen and follow
Yeah.
instructions, everything would be great. So I like that working together. When I work with parents, I talk about news you can use, like giving your children news they can use in terms of making decisions, making choices, even when they're younger. There's a way that you can communicate to them, like if they want to go get ice cream, but there's certain things around the house that need to be done. They need to pick up their toys and put their clothes in the
Right.
laundry basket or whatever. There's a way you can communicate that. You could say, no, we're not going anywhere. Look at this house. Look at everything that's messed up. Or you can say, we'll be able to go get the ice cream when the shoes are picked up and when the toys are put away.
Right.
Let me know. And so then it's in their hands. They know how they can win. In this particular instance, you've given them the information, so it's news they can use. And it also occurs to me as well that in having this conversation and asking your children about how they feel about things, how they perceive things, what they want, what they are interested in doing, what they're dreaming about doing, and how they think they're going to get there, that's news we can use so that we can help them be successful.
We'll be right back after this.
Are you a parent looking to unlock your potential in raising confident, capable, and courageous children? Well, look no further. Join us at the upcoming Parent and Purpose Summit Back to School Edition, where parenting experts from around the world will come together to share their wisdom and insights. I'm Carol Maletta, founder of the Parenting 411. This summit is your opportunity to gain essential skills and tools to become the parent you've always aspired to be. Over 5 incredible days, we'll dive deep into topics like positive discipline, effective communication, mental health, self-care, school readiness, and more. An attendee from our last summit told us, "This summit changed my parenting game. I feel more confident and connected with my children than ever before." So secure your seat at the Parent and Purpose Summit today. Visit parentandpurposesummit2023.com. That's parentandpurposesummit2023.com. And click the registration button to join us on this transformative journey. The Parent and Purpose Summit, where intentional parenting begins. And we're back with the Parenting 411.
Yeah, and creating that back and forth,
Mm-hmm.
creating that sort of exchange of narratives. And my kids have gotten really great at being able to predict me. And by going through the experience of having a dad who focuses on trust and tells them about the model, says, I'm trying to understand benevolence when it comes to you. And I'll sit down and ask them, what's a good dad look like? That's terrifying. Right? Because what if they say not you? Right? But when it comes to pulling the ability lever, I actually want to include them in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say, do you understand what the rules are, what my values are, and how that plays out, and how I try to be consistent around that? They have gotten really good at understanding, here's how dad's going to react. And in moments when I'm upset, they'll look at me and they'll say, oh, you seem a little annoyed, a little frustrated. Is it me? What's going on? Instead of just making up their own story. And remember that when we're young, and maybe when we're not so young, we're the center of our own story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm having a hard day, there's a really good chance that they assume, oh, that's me.
Right.
I did something, I said something, dad's pissed off at me. And now I'm kind of getting pissed off at him because I don't know what I did, and this isn't fair. And it escalates, right? It cascades on itself.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, my kids have learned to go, you seem upset. Is it me? And I'm able to go, no, it's me. I'm really frustrated. And I've done this and I've done this and this has gone wrong. And they're like, let's problem solve around that. Let's talk about it. And so they're not making assumptions. And they're able to express that vulnerability of going, well, dad's upset. It may be me. But if it is,
mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say something else I like about that is as well. I mean, when parents are honest that way about how things are going with them, of course, in an age appropriate way. I mean, some things are not meant for them to get involved with, but it teaches them to trust their instincts, because you could very well be, oh no, I'm fine. Why are you asking me that? Why? And so then they're like, oh, okay, like I really thought something was wrong here, but
I've seen all these signals.
Honest with it, right? Yeah. And so then now they don't trust they won't learn to trust their instincts,
and they also learn that, hey, if I'm upset about something, I'm not supposed to tell anyone.
That too, mm-hmm.
Right? Absolutely. If I'm having a tough day, I'm fine.
Right.
I'm going to do the behavior I got modeled, instead of saying, yeah, I messed up and I did something wrong. Mm-hmm. Or, my kids have seen me lose my temper. Mm-hmm. Rarely with them. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. My sons still laugh about situations where I've gotten frustrated and annoyed with someone and I start to get snarky. Right? And they're like, start just saying things, and they're kind of like, yeah, dad was really pissed off. And they laugh about it, right? And I say, well, that's probably not the best role modeling, and it's not the best example, but I'm human. Right. And they know that one of the things that really triggers dad is somebody messing with one of my boys. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And they know dad's got my back.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And my oldest was umpiring baseball. He's like 9 years old, and he's umpiring 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the coaches apparently had watched too much TV and thought that it was his role to come out and yell at the umpire,
Oh, wow.
who's a 9-year-old kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Thomas says, the next sound I hear was the sound of dad hitting the gate. And the gate slams open, and I'm standing there, and the coach kind of looks up, and I said, do we have a problem? And he kind of goes a little bit pale, and he goes, nope, we're all good. Turns around and walks away. I said, are you okay? To my son, he goes, yeah, I'm fine. But, you know, don't provoke dad is one of the lessons they've learned. And it's also the learning is I'm safe with dad,
Mm-hmm.
because he never has that response with me. When things go wrong, he's there, and he talks about, okay, things happen. It's how we respond that matters.
Mm-hmm.
My
Mm-hmm.
main concern is you and you doing well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Now, how do you think trust, a strong foundation of trust between parent and child, contributes to healthy mental well-being as children, but then later on in life?
That's a really good and such a timely question,
Mm-hmm.
because we're facing an epidemic of mental health challenges.
Yes.
And I believe that it's my role as a parent to create a safe harbor for my kids
Mm-hmm.
from which they can take risks. They
Mm-hmm.
can go out in the world, get knocked around, because the world's not always a friendly place,
Right.
and they can learn to be resilient.
Mm-hmm.
So, me modeling high trust levels for them means that they know that there's a place they can go where they're safe, where they can have conversations that are safe, where they can ask for help if they need it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way for us to teach coping mechanisms, but it's also a way for us to future proof our kids, because
Yes.
once I model that for them, then they're able to replicate that out in the world. And I don't know about you, but things are changing so fast. I'm worried about, one career is probably not going to be in their future. It's going to be multiple careers. There's going to
Oh,
be so much
yes.
change.
Those days are over. Yes.
Yeah. And so how do we prepare them for this kind of volatile environment?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we teach them to create relationships,
Mm-hmm.
because that's something that's never going to go out of style.
I agree with you. It's really I creating relationships, and also to never stop learning.
There's a certain amount of humility in that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, this belief that we're not perfect, this acceptance that we're going to be learning and growing and developing. And you know
Mm-hmm.
what? As I learn new things, I'm going to make mistakes, because it's
Mm-hmm.
rare that I'm good at something the first time I try it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that ability to make mistakes and have it not be critical or world ending,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, that ability to, and I got to tell you, for a long time, I I talk about stepping on a rake. When
Mm.
we make a mistake, you step on a rake and the handle comes up and pops you in the nose and it hurts.
Right. Right.
And for a long time, I was one of those dads who was like, look out, there's a rake. There's a rake. You're going to step on it. Look out, there's a rake. And I realized that what my kids were learning was that dad knows where the rakes are.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going to help them when dad's not around? Right.
Exactly.
And so I learned to hold back a bit and go, oh, you just stepped on a rake. Now, how do we react? And what are some of the signs we could have seen beforehand that that rake was coming? How
Mm-hmm.
could we have avoided that? And, I'm a slow learner sometimes. Like I've gone on trips with both of my sons,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm legally blind, and I've got a guide dog named Drake who helps me navigate the world. But I've got this pattern of behaviors that I engage in when I'm traveling
Mm-hmm.
that allows me to navigate the world and figure things out and get where I'm going. And I started to fall into that pattern of behavior with both of them. And I had to consciously remind myself, no, step back. Let them drive.
Mm-hmm.
Let them make the mistakes. Let them learn some of the lessons. what better time than when I'm standing here as a safety net in case things go wrong? And, it's giving them that opportunity to take the lead and to be able to be there when they have questions. My son Thomas and I were in downtown Boston, and we're trying to get somewhere, and he finally just stops and looks at me and says, "I'm stuck. Like, I have no idea where we are or where to go." And I said, "Well, we're actually standing right outside a very nice hotel. There are people inside the lobby who get paid to be nice to strangers for a living." I said, "Let's just go in and ask." And so we went inside, and he asked one of the folks, and they were delighted to help him. And he was like, "Okay, another coping strategy, right? We can ask for help, and that's okay." And, there's this old trope about men being, reluctant to ask for directions when they're driving somewhere, right? And I think partly that comes from the fact that, stereotypically men used to do the driving. As the blind guy, I've experienced that with other people who are driving, men and women. And it's about control. And so as a parent, are we willing to stop and ask for directions? Are we willing to model that for our kids? Are we willing to teach them how to do that and not feel less than or diminished? Because that's what trust looks like a lot of times, is asking for help.
I like that. And that's definitely something that you can start teaching children at an early age. And it gives them valuable life skills, but it also, allows them to trust you and respect you, because you're saying, "Hey, I'm not sure about the answer to that either. Where can we find help? What resource can we look to help us get answers to that question? Because I don't know. I don't have all the answers."
Yeah. And that prepares them for a life of making mistakes and learning new things and growing and developing and needing help, just like everyone else on the planet. And it actually better prepares them because they understand that it's okay, and they learn the way to ask for help when they need it.
And that's a very important skill, and to really not only know who to ask, but just to feel confident, to not think less of yourself because you need to ask for help.
I got to tell you, Drake and I wander the world, and my experience of the world is one of people who are kind and caring and friendly. Drake has the most positive story about the rest of the world. He wakes up, it's the best day ever. Everyone he meets is a friend that he hasn't met yet. And he has such a positive outlook on the world. It's infectious. And I need help often. And as I navigate the world, my experience of people is that they're overwhelmingly caring and compassionate. That's not the experience that everyone has. And part of it is that willingness to be vulnerable, that willingness to accept help, that willingness to ask for help when I need it.
I agree. Well, I have really enjoyed our conversation today. Can you tell us how we can grab a copy of your book and how we can follow your work?
So the book is called Building Trust: Exceptional Leadership in an Uncertain World. I wrote it so that people would have access, so that it would scale. And if people want to help me spread the word, they would pick up a copy of the book and not just read it, but start to apply the concepts. You can find me at trustunlimited.com. And if you go into the blog section, there's actually an article on trust and parenting. There's an article on rebuilding trust with the police. There's articles on trust and leadership, those kinds of things. You can email me, Darryl at trustunlimited.com, or reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your joining me today for a very important topic, because trust is a very important foundational element of the relationship between parents and children.
Yeah.
And it does need to be earned. We can't just assume our children should trust us. We shouldn't
Right.
take that for granted. We should always be mindful that it's something to be earned. And I'm not sure that a lot of people think about it that way.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your time and just your passion for this topic. I really am glad that you were able to join me today. And to our
Me too.
listeners, as usual, thank you for tuning in. And please like, share, and subscribe to the Parenting 411 podcast. Be sure to share this episode with your friends and follow us at the Parenting 411 on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And if you'd like to watch the video of this interview, if you came in midway and you wanna catch the whole thing, just join us over at the YouTube channel and you can catch the video. And I want you to head on over to the parenting411.com and see what's going on with us, and you can connect with me there. And as always, remember that it's never too late to be the parent that you want to be.